Hello, everyone out there. We are going to talk about 13th today, documentary from Ava DuVernay. Can anyone pronounce that?
Just Ava.
Ava?
DuVernay.
Ava D. Ava D. A-D. Anyways, first, hi, Sarah. Hi, Yaz.
Hi. And I'm not sure if this is a coincidence or luck. So it happens to be our 13th episode of the podcast. And we are talking about the movie 13th.
Oh,
I will
wow.
call it a luck.
And today's the 13th.
No.
Is it?
No? Oh, well, then it's not. And then when it's not that special then. Could have had a, what do you call it? Like a trifecta? What is the hockey term? Who cares?
I don't know.
Hat trick.
Yeah.
Hat trick. It's a hat trick. Yes? Am I right?
Yeah.
I don't know. All right.
Yeah.
So 13th, right? We thought it was pertinent, relevant to what's going on today. So we're going to switch off and be a little more serious, I assume. I don't know.
Yeah, I was already like serious and angry the moment I walked into your place and in our studio, because I just finished watching the movie, and I felt angry all the time. Was it the same for you as
car
well?
ride over. Yeah, I mean, by the end of the movie, I was like, "This is serious, serious."
Should we explain a little bit what it is, Sarah?
Yeah.
Can you just give a couple sentence overview of what this is about?
Yeah, so it's a documentary about racial inequality in the U.S., focusing specifically on how the 13th Amendment of the Constitution led to mass incarceration, specifically for African Americans.
And what was the 13th Amendment?
13th Amendment is the Emancipation Proclamation, so it freed the slaves after the Civil War.
Okay, and then what was there you would think that wouldn't lead to what it led to, but
it's a surprising chain of events that started with freeing slavery.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how did you feel about it? We heard Yaz got a little heated afterwards, so we're going to find out about that. What was your kind of impression?
So this documentary is jam-packed with information, and it was a lot of information I didn't know, and I was surprised by some things, and I thought the people they had talking throughout the documentary were really engaging and had really amazing things to say. But overall, I liked it. It was really informative. It was really serious, and it's extremely relevant.
Okay.
Yeah, extremely relevant. Especially the 15 final minutes of the movie. It was just so relevant. Basically you can take it, clip it out, and play it all over again because of the current events after George Floyd's death, and basically it was speaking to the reality of now, and it was so when you realize that this movie is not even a new release, you would realize that the issues these issues have been always out there, but right now, because of the media attention, because of the current event, we are maybe getting more directed towards paying our attention. Oh, sorry, that was such a complex sentence.
I got you. It's the confluence of the pandemic along with George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery. Swung the pendulum. It gave it momentum, right? So now we're kind of really, everything's really in the forefront right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
I gotcha.
Yeah, I saw an article saying that Netflix said the views for this documentary has surged by 4,000% over the past.
Yeah, well, a
3
whole
weeks.
bunch of lists came out, on Rotten Tomatoes. It was on, they had I don't know how they labeled it, so I want to be careful. But they had a list of movies that were pertinent to what was happening today.
Yeah, and Netflix has a Black Lives Matter collection.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so it makes sense.
It does.
This is part of the reason why we wanted to, because I hadn't seen this movie until, or this documentary. And to tell you the truth, I probably don't even remember hearing about it until now. So
You will be surprised if I tell you Navid watched it over a year ago.
Oh, really?
why would I be surprised at anything that man does? That man does everything.
He's just too perfect.
Yeah, and when I asked him like, "Oh, why did you watch it?" At that time, he was like, "Oh, because I wanted to know more about wrong policies of Bill Clinton's era." And I was like, "What? That's why
We
you?"
are so like the opposite ends of like human evolution. Like he takes all his spare time to learn, and I take my spare time to not think. I just want to throw on some reality show and not think.
Yeah, and you may not believe it that he watched it on a plane when he was on his way to come to LA, because at that time I was in LA with my friends. And we were celebrating someone's birthday, and he was on his way to join us for a birthday weekend, and he decided to watch this on plane so he could have like
As a plane
The-
movie?
as a plane movie. And I was
Man,
like,
I
oh my-
watched like Disney or Lord of the Rings on the plane.
yeah.
All right, enough of this man. I don't
Yeah.
want to hear anymore.
Navid, if you watch this, which I doubt, but you know that you have some fans, pretty serious fans here.
We're really only friends with you to get to him. So that's our main objective.
Yeah. Once we found out how awesome Naveed is.
Yes.
All right, so lovely tangent, good guy. But so he watched 13th. I didn't know about it. Did you know about it?
I have zero idea about it.
Other than Naveed watched it.
No, I just like last night I was about to watch it and I told him, "Oh, let's watch it together." And he was like, "Oh, I watched it a long time."
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we're all in the same boat.
Yes. I kept hearing about this movie since the beginning of recent events, because I saw a lot of posts on Instagram or like generally over the internet that people were encouraging to watch this movie, encouraging other people to watch this movie to know more about a little bit of historical context. I wanted to watch it for a long time. I mean by the long time I mean for the past month basically, or less than like 3 weeks ago, like in the past 3 weeks. But I didn't have the time, and I'm really glad that finally we found this like opportunity to talk about it, because for me it was so informational. First of all, I was shocked by the amount of information revealed, and as Sarah said, it was like full of like information. And it's not one of those documentaries that you will care about a specific character. It's just like about the subject. So it's just like the good compact piece of information by like
I think it kind of worked though. If people have followed this podcast, I kind of like have issues when there's just too much going on. But since it was kind of following a historical timeline, I wasn't bothered by that.
Yeah.
At all.
And they like throughout different points they did talk about specific people.
Right.
Yes. Like I remember, so for example, there was this like young boy, Emmett Till, that he killed at the beginning of like whole civil rights movements or around that time.
For apparently whistling at a white woman, right?
Yeah, that's what they said.
And then on her deathbed, she admitted that he didn't do that. Yeah.
So basically I remember like hearing his name while I was at African American National Museum like some time ago, and like over 2 years ago, and I didn't have the chance to know the story that much, but this documentary was just like an aha moment for me to realize that, oh, that's the boy, that's the open casket guy. And basically it was just like this documentary put all the pieces of the puzzles for me in like the same place, like all the informations that I was hearing throughout the years about like injustices and like basically all the discriminations that Black folks are getting, the police brutality, and it was just like a very nice bundle of the things that you can watch and like, you know, educate yourself. But as again, I always agree, it's just like the start. You need to pick get yourself familiar with the subjects and then do more research if you want to know more about the specific part. So never rely on a single documentary to educate yourself.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, no, don't rely on influencers and podcasts. Don't rely on a single documentary. Don't even rely on a single study. Check the references and, you know, compare to multiple other studies and see how they actually, you know, studied the data. So.
Yeah.
Or just listen to Joe Rogan. That's what I do. Whatever he says, I believe.
And he's not a podcast, you know, he's not an influencer. But yeah, the good thing at least about Joe Rogan's podcast is that you will see different like sources, I mean, coming to his show and they are talking. So basically you will at least have a broad selection of like people like giving you facts.
He's a great dude because like he really like listens and he can change his mind. You know, some people are just so, you know, stuck in their ways. They have a thought and then they'll just argue it to death, you know, but it seems like his mind is fairly open. So yeah, Joe Rogan, you know, if you're going to listen to, I mean, I don't agree with everything he says. I disagree with a few things. I think recently about like police reform, maybe his understanding of what defunding the police is on a recent podcast with Jocko. But for the most part, you know, I love his attitude. I love that he allows people to speak, unlike what I'm doing right now, since I'm going off this tangent. I just want to see how many words I can crank in.
You're getting high. The word count's getting high.
Thank you. Yeah. So I went off on a little tangent. You know, not a single documentary, but where do you guys want to lead this conversation? I think people out there kind of generally know now what this documentary is about, or maybe have already seen it. But what do you want to? Let's leave it open. I don't know how to frame this. What do you want to talk about and dissect?
I think maybe we can talk about like things that we learned that were surprising or.
Yes. And speaking of that, even in that movie, they use the word shock or introducing some shocking facts
in order to get people's attention.
In order to get people's attention, and I think that I want to like talk about some of the stuff that I was shocked by learning through this documentary. So I will just start with the first fact that I was very shocked, and I realized. After watching this documentary, I realized that, there are some people, some U.S. citizens that can't vote. Why? Because they have committed felony for 3 times. It was so shocking for me to know that there is such thing that take away someone's right to vote. That was insane. I don't know. Did you guys know that before? That if you committed a felony, you can't vote?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so insane. Why?
Yeah, that's why I can't vote. Because I have multiple felonies, a couple murders, and no, I'm just kidding. I knew about that, but I don't know if I agree with that. Do you?
Of course not.
Yeah, but it's another system of control, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's another system of control and voter suppression because it's in some people's best interest to not let more people vote.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you know...
Because,
and to keep the systemic inequality
because the elected officials who help run this country, their interest is malaligned with the public interest, right? So obviously anything they can do to keep themselves in power makes sense, especially during that time. So yeah, that's not surprising, but it's sad.
It's sad. And also if you put it in the context of the documentary, which is like the impact on a community of color, is basically that, okay, you have some poor communities they are like flooded with different crimes. And by the way, no one in this documentary getting to a root cause of a lot of that much of a root cause why, for example, like a lot of African American are incarcerated. But basically, that's lack of education, lack of like access to a lot of like other benefits that a healthy community needs to have access to, lead to like segregated like neighborhoods that they are flooded with crimes. And guess what, like if you are a kid and you start like, and you if you are an unlucky one and if you start like being in a gang, and then if you commit three like crimes, you can't even vote. So basically it's just like that you are systematically putting like community of colors in the position that they can't vote after being incarcerated and like after being criminalized. So it's just
So that's one element that gets us to today, right? Because those are symptoms. Voter suppression is one of the root causes that leads to the symptoms that we see today. Should we go back? Actually, Sarah, can you explain what was the language in the 13th Amendment, that loophole that transitioned us to? Because the better part of like one of the interesting things I found about 13th was the visual timeline and then the showing of how the prison numbers just exponentially grew over time. But how did we get to that? What was the language, if you remember?
So the 13th Amendment says no person can be a slave, or like everyone is free.
Which is good. Except
for those who have been charged with a crime. So that's why you can have prison labor for free. You don't have to pay them because they're paying their debt back to society.
That was terrible.
I forgot where the screen is. I have a slideshow put up, not in order. You know what? I should have set up the hotkey so I can get to it. We'll eventually play it through, but I think in the beginning there were some like data text or text from someone who was like, don't quote me on this or don't record me, and he was like dropping the N-bomb, and he was saying you can't say that anymore.
Is that when they were talking about the Southern strategy?
Yes, Southern strategy, exactly.
In the very beginning. But it was just an indicator to me, or a reaffirmation that sure, slavery ended, but there are unfortunately some minds out there that sought to, work around that.
Yeah, because the documentary really talks about how slavery like transformed through the ages. Like I think I wrote down at the end, like slavery.
You want to run us through that? Yeah.
Yeah. Slavery, which supposedly ended in 1865, and then after that, there was convict leasing. So because the South was like, our economy's in tatters because we can't use slaves anymore. So how can we use the language of the 13th Amendment to get the free labor that we're missing? And they started arresting African Americans en masse
for just like very tiny like minor offenses, like basically loitering, if that's the word.
For tiny offenses, in order to make them
how come loitering is an offense?
Well, I mean, maybe if you have like a business, you don't want like people just hanging around. Do you remember like McDonald's? They had the McDonald's brothers first started out with like a drive-in type situation, and then they converted where it was no longer drive-in, and they got rid of like the vending machines on the outside, just to create a more an attractive location for families to come in, instead of like teens hanging around in front of the store smoking cigarettes or doing whatever. So maybe that's where loitering came about.
Yes, and I guess that was crazy. Okay, continue, please.
So they got that labor that way, and that turned into Jim Crow laws throughout most of the 20th century, until the 60s and 70s and civil rights movements, and then that's when we started to see the mass incarceration.
Was that around the war on drugs time?
Yeah.
That's the start of it.
Yeah, the war on drugs.
Yeah.
Nixon and Reagan's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the numbers jumped. They were crazy, right? I mean, they went from like 100,000, double that, and then where did they end up?
2.3 million.
Something million. Yeah.
Jeez.
The crazy part about war on crimes was like the comparison between the degree of offense for if you holding like cocaine versus crack, because cocaine was this luxury product that white community usually like handling, and crack was basically black folks material. And it was just so shocking to know that the amount of penalty that they are going to receive, which should be basically the same, wasn't the same, because the law was written in a way to
So which is the one to use if you want to use it? Is it crack or cocaine?
I will go for none.
Cocaine's the expensive stuff.
Yeah. So cocaine is the expensive stuff. Yeah, but it's basically that was terrible to know that poor like drug addicts, because they are doing crack, they have to face like I don't know how many times more, 10 times more than if they are holding like cocaine. So it was just like crazy.
Yeah, and it's just like a repeating cycle, right? I mean, just think about how like I don't know if enough thought has like been put into what led a large group of people to end up using drugs. And when you're a drug addict, there's a chance that criminality becomes a part of your life, right? Because you need to afford the drugs. But what happened before that? What got them into that state? How was their mental health before then? How did they grow up, right? Like you said earlier, yes, like, lack of education is a huge thing, right? What about like affordable housing? If you're growing up, moving, I mean, we worked with Habitat for Humanity, right? And that's a big problem because some people, they have to go from house to house. There's no stability in there. I've worked with a therapist that, just really like hones in on the fact that stability ages like 0 through, 13 or so, like important. So this is, shaping. And on top of that, there's such a long history that these kids grow up being taught from their parents to fear the police, right? So it's already setting people on different sides and, on opposing, sides. So, this leads to mental health. This leads to, like maybe even physical health, right? And then what happens if you're struggling with, with things like that? I mean, drugs are a thing that alters your mind, right?
Yes, and also I was reading somewhere that basically being the criminal or being part of the gang for a lot of kids who grew up in like poor neighborhoods is their way of getting the respect that they had never had the chance to get from their society, their teachers, their classmates, their family members. So they don't have any other option.
And we're tribal people.
Yes.
We want a group to be a part of. Right. So
when there is such high arrest rates and people's family members are being taken away, like people's parents, it's less people to take care of the kids.
Yeah.
And so it's more of an unstable life.
That sucks.
Yeah, and the sad news is like we still run into the same issues, really. Today, which leads to kind of the same results and symptoms.
I mean, I think this documentary does a good job about how about explaining how a lot, like all the problems we're facing today, have these roots in history and were made because of people's decisions and the chain of events. Yeah,
it was so like sucky to see towards the end. They had like black and white stills and video of like protests in the street, these grainy footage of African Americans being like pushed and attacked, And then you fast forward decades later, and then you see the same thing happening in vivid HD color, like at Trump rallies or on the streets.
Yeah,
you know,
okay.
people
Just
elbowing.
record it better now.
Yeah. So
the
it's
same
like,
thing that's
man,
happening.
really? I thought stuff got better, and I'm sure it did. But you know, just seeing those images back to back makes me question, like, how much did we really improve?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I just want to add like a tiny
Oh, here we
note
go.
on that Trump scene. So, okay, I love a lot of things about this documentary.
Oh,
but
I thought you were gonna say I love a lot of things about Donald Trump.
no. Okay, so as a disclaimer there, I don't like Donald Trump. I don't want to say I hate him. Maybe I should. But I don't like him. But also I can't stand when people try to like make him looks worse than make him looks worse than what he is already.
Well, anyone, right?
Yes.
No one should be misrepresented
Yes.
in film.
So there was this moment in 13 documentary that
In a documentary.
in the documentary that as you said, like parts of the speeches of Trump that he was referring to good old days, and it was mixed with the footage of like African American has been very brutally dragged on the streets. They have been punched in the face, and Trump was like talking that, oh, I can punch that guy in the face. So when you watch it as a part of like the documentary, you feel like that, oh, Trump is like basically talking about African American or like
What was he talking about then? Did you watch did
Yeah,
you scour? Did
yeah,
you
okay, so
look for the original?
So it was part of his rally. So the original events that happened wasn't directed towards any African American. It was basically about people who are showing up at Trump rallies to protest him. So he was talking in general about
But they were showing a woman who...
but it wasn't okay, so Donald
So it wasn't about African Americans. It was just about protesters.
it was protesters.
So much better. Yeah, punch them in the face.
No, but the thing is that, okay, so he wasn't talking about any African American specific. And that scene that he was talking, oh, I could punch him in the face, he was basically talking about like a white person who showed up at his rally and he was protesting Trump, and police security service came to that man and asked him to leave, and Trump was like angry that, oh, back in the old days they should have like dragged him out of the city. So he was encouraging the violence, definitely, but he wasn't encouraging violence against like African American, you know,
Well,
or
who's
black
likely,
people.
who's likely to show up as protesters, though?
Yeah.
So like other like sane people with like who might not, who might.
I'm going to defend Ava.
But yeah, I think the point is there because his whole "Make America Great Again" thing is like that past, where I mean, it's still continued
Yes,
to the
I
present,
agree.
but
I
like
agree.
past the police brutality, especially against African Americans.
And you can't disagree that okay, his supporters are, some of his supporters are like white supremacists. This is an undeniable fact that like some racist people, some white supremacists are his are among his supporters, but like showing him or trying to show him as a person that he's specifically talking about, oh, punching African American in face, or like dragging on them on the street, or like throwing
I got
them.
you. So, like, you don't agree with the rhetoric or the bluster from him, period, in general, but your issue was like on a you know, you would have appreciated more if like you're gonna put it in the documentary in that way he actually meant it for or said it about African Americans and not the protesters, right? You're just kind of like
No, the way that he said it like wrong, but I'm not agree. I don't appreciate.
like what did he say originally?
He said exactly the words that he was saying, and you heard in the documentary about.
And he said that about who?
He said about like people who protest him, and they are in the a specific video that I watched from him. It was like a white protesters, not like someone African American, you know. So he wasn't talking necessarily about
Black
people.
But Ava in the 13th used that clip to insinuate that
Because
Trump
he
was
was
talking about black people.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
That's clear. Yeah, sorry for.
No, I gotcha. I gotcha.
Because-
And then Sarah, you're kind of saying that like, well, first of all, you agree with Yaz that the rhetoric is not good, anyways, to sort of like spark violence with your words or anything like that, or promote it, right?
Yes.
But at the same time, maybe in a way too, I don't want to give him more credit than he deserves, but possibly in a way too, you tie in protesters who's likely, like I said earlier, to like be a part of the group that protests him, right? African Americans are not like huge fans of Donald Trump, right? So yeah, in a documentary, you want to be as like, you don't want to misconstrue people's words as much as possible. So I get where you're coming from.
Yeah, it's just like that. He
can
putting
see
his
that.
words on an unrelated context. It wasn't unrelated. So yeah, exactly as you said, it was just basically manipulative. That scene was particularly for me manipulative and a little bit
You
unnecessary.
heard it, Ava. Yaz just called you out.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Yeah,
Ain't she friends with Oprah? You're in trouble.
Oh, yeah. I'm in huge trouble. But yeah, as a documentary, so you make this great documentary. It's already full with, it's already filled with like a lot of true facts. But for like very cautious like viewers like me, these little things might them question even bigger facts about the things that are true. So I'm always saying that showing an honest imagery and trying not to doctor the image in a way to get what you want is not right. It's not the right way, because other people might also put the finger on the other right things that you mentioned, and tell them, oh, it's not right, it's all manipulation, which is not the case, and we know it's not the case. And yeah, so it was, sorry, I was angry about a lot of stuff, and that scene in particular also like make me a little bit agitated, because I had to do some research and I had to convince myself that, oh, what was the true or the correct course of actions that course of events that happened and led to Trump saying those words to people in his rally. And I was glad that it wasn't directed to any black people.
Mind it, but I don't want to talk about Trump much more. He doesn't really deserve it.
Yes.
It was such a small part of that, thing. There's so much in 13th, though,
Yes,
right? So,
exactly.
What else did you like take away from it then, or learn? Either of you two.
Yeah, I was really fascinated in the documentary and appreciated how they traced ideas, like how ideas get implanted in people's mind, and how like we keep perpetuating these norms of inequality. And it like I think in the beginning of the documentary, when I didn't know that after the Civil War ended that there was this like mass incarceration to get this free labor. I was like, oh my God, I didn't know that happened. And I started thinking back to my high school history education. And I remember learning about in my American history class, my American history teacher was very like adamant about, she was like, the cause of the Civil War was not slavery. The cause of the Civil War was states' rights. And at the time I was like, oh, okay. And then I remember
In Ohio?
Yeah, in Cleveland, in Ohio. And then I remember, talking to my family about, like what I learned in school or whatever. And my brother-in-law pointed out to me, and he was like, okay, if the Civil War was about states' rights to do what? To have slaves. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh.
Totally different.
Oh.
Yeah. And so it just got me thinking
Sugarcoating.
about like, the kind of rhetoric that is taught in schools. And and
you're like 18 years old, right?
Yeah,
So that like
it was
happened like
17,
a year
18.
ago.
Oh yeah, I'm so young.
You are to us.
Can't even vote yet, according to some people.
Oh, I thought it's because of your previous convictions, but
your felony. The real murderer is sitting across from me. So wow, yeah, that wasn't too long ago. With all seriousness. So.
Yeah, and I like consider myself as having like a pretty as having a very liberal education.
Mm.
And like I also like pretty much grew up thinking, oh, like only the South is racist.
Yes.
Which I realized that is not true as I got older, but that is because like when we learned about that kind of thing in school, it's always about like, oh, like the South was bad. These things don't happen up here.
Nah, have you been like Oregon or Washington or North Dakota?
I have actually never been to those states.
Yeah, it can get pretty rough for some
Yeah,
people
the
up there
only
too.
southern states that I have ever been to were Texas and Louisiana. And I remember every time I go to Texas, I'm shocked by seeing like Confederate flags. So like
There's even like this past week I spent at my friend's house who lives a little bit more south in Ohio. So even if you go like about an hour south from Cleveland or whatever, you start seeing Confederate flags. Because where she lives is more countryside, but there's Confederate flags everywhere. Even when I went to school in Erie, Pennsylvania, which is super north, it's on the Great Lakes. There's this house that is across from the entrance to my college that had this huge. They had like one of the huge Trump flags that were on wooden stilts, and next to it they had an equally huge Confederate flag on wooden stilts.
yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know.
It's kind of
it's
weird.
crazy how like it's kind of everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is. It is. I had someone work on my house once, and he brought his brother over for a job, and just like totally cool dude, like always super nice to me, always offering help. Call me anytime if you just want to run through like suggestions or numbers or anything like that. And one time he faced his brother, and his brother turned the phone to me. Hey, say what's up. And I was, I was like, yeah, hey, what's up? And behind him was this huge, like, Confederate flag. So, I don't know. Maybe my hope is that, some, youthful people, like how some people like the goth sort of, like, look and stuff. Maybe some people are just being rebellious and, it's just a thing. But, yeah, unfortunately, it is kind of surprising how prevalent the support is around that symbol, which today we kind of generally accept as, a symbol of discrimination.
Yes, a symbol of discrimination. And the other thing is that I think the most optimistic way that if I want to think about someone who is using the Confederate flag, the most optimistic way I can think about them is that, maybe they are ignorant. It is basically that, because the other route is that maybe they still think that they are better than other races, or they support like slavery and white supremacy.
Well, it's part of this like whole bigger rhetoric about how, especially the Confederate flag, people throughout the course of history turned it into like, this is remembering our Southern heritage.
Yeah. But these are kind of just like new forms of being racist, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like in the 13th, right? He's like, you can't use the N-word anymore, but you can use language like forced busing. Like that's their version of, you can't say the word, so we're going to say forced busing, and that's our new way to be racist. Sort of thing.
And like this remembering heritage thing came from, how do I explain this?
Two bushes, a volleyball,
two bushes, and a monkey. But like it came from a history of trying to like after the Civil War in the South was able to, even though they were the losing side, they were like, we're the martyrs. And just expanded, just like kept racism around through this method.
By glorifying their like the people who they lost.
Yeah, which they explain in the documentary.
Yeah, that's to me is very weird, because in my mind, maybe I am so naive because I'm coming from another country, but in my mind I'm like thinking and comparing to it that weren't the Confederacy were the losing, if they were the losing part of the war, so how come they are like
So
putting their
prideful.
flags and so prideful?
mhm.
It's like that you are walking in like East Germany and see like the Hitler or Nazis like statues everywhere, and they said that, oh, let's glorify that. Maybe that like comparison is a little bit extreme, but
I got you.
Like,
to my mind, it's just like kind of like
mhm.
the same, like, you know, basically glorifying around something that you know wasn't right.
Yeah, glorifying this like past where maybe people who don't feel empowered today, but they were like, oh, we used to have power in the past.
Yeah. So that confuses you, Yaz, right? Like just the pride that people have over a symbol of a side that lost, right? So is that in a way similar to Ready to Alienate People in 3, 2, 1, people who have like Cleveland Browns paraphernalia?
Hey, Cleveland takes it in stride. Then we have a parade for like perfect losses or something.
Hey, this year, man, this is the year. All right, what you got going on there? What are you looking at?
Wow.
What's in your notes? In your do you write in cursive? What is that?
It's cursive. It's
Yeah.
cursive.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's my to-do list that I put the favorite quotes, my favorite quotes from the movie. So I will I want to like just briefly mention. I think at the beginning I also said that after watching this documentary I realized that, oh, these issues have always been there, but now they just, for some reason, they brought to our attention. And that's my favorite quote, one of my favorite quote from the documentary, that a gentleman showed his phone and basically says that he was talking about like how showing images and the power of media helps basically to rally people around like a cause like Black Lives Matter. And he was telling that, oh, the oppression was always have been there. The only new thing is that now there are people who can capture that on their phone. And I guess in the case of George Floyd, that's exactly what happened, because someone who has been there, they shot the whole scene with the cop, and that's why it became viral. If there was no footage of George Floyd saying, I can't breathe, maybe today we didn't see that much of like basically protest going on around, because someone was able to shoot that. And just to quote the documentary, that gentleman says that that's what's new, and he was like mentioning it, YouTube and stuff like that. It's not the protest, it's not the brutality, it's the fact that we can force a conversation about it. And that was my favorite quote of the movie. So
there was something I found interesting, is in the documentary they showed a clip of another footage from another African American man being, I'm not sure if he was killed by the police or not, but he was on the ground and he was also saying, I can't breathe.
Oscar something.
No, Oscar Grant was Oakland, shot at the BART station. I think it was
Actually, if my husband was here, he could tell
He
you the
would
name,
know.
because I told him, oh, Navid, do you know there was another guy who said that, oh, I can't breathe, and he was like, yeah, his name was this, and he gave me the full story about it. But yeah, it was also a shocking part.
Yeah, because I was like, oh, that's extremely similar to the George Floyd video. So then I was trying to think, okay, so then why did the George Floyd video spark these protests, but the other video didn't?
No, it did. I mean,
Okay.
like athletes, like LeBron was famous for in his wearing, while he was playing for the Cleveland Cavaliers, wearing an "I Can't Breathe" T-shirt.
Oh, yes.
When the first happened.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now
So-
those
and
events
probably not the first. I don't mean the first, but
now those events are connected in my head.
yeah. And I just think once again, it's just that confluence of the pandemic, being stuck at home, losing, every business is shutting down. The highest employment rate we've seen in how long led to this frustration that when George, Floyd had his incident, it was just like a powder keg, right?
Yeah, it's just like that a void has been already created, and basically that void space of other things led to this movement come and become surface. So and that's kind of sad because we need a pandemic and we need like people stuck at home to pay attention to these things. It's just sad, but who am I to say? Because I wasn't, before that I was kind of like living. I don't want to say ignorant. I don't call myself an ignorant person, but I am not doing anything actively on a daily basis. And after watching this documentary, I thought that, okay, maybe the least thing that I can do from now on is that at least if I want to support a brand or if I want to shop from like somewhere, just do a little bit research about if they are, using prison labor or if there is anything negatively attached to their history. And I thought that that's the least thing that I can do as a person, just to try to be more educated and try to just, be willing to listen, and not only be willing, but also act on it. Just try to educate myself. And if I have the opportunity, just be the voice. And yeah.
Yeah, no, those are great things to strive for just as a human being, right? And I think you're pretty much like that anyways, yeah, so you're on a good track. You're always late, but you're aside from that.
I mean, you also didn't, because you grew up in Iran.
Yes.
So you didn't learn U.S. history, that's right, in
but
this
also
history of racism.
yes,
in
exactly,
this
but
country.
But even in the context of Iran, so Iranian people, some of them, they are extremely, extremely racist. And so after Taliban, Iran has seen a shocking waves of immigration from Afghanistan to Iran. So a lot of Afghan immigrants faced harsh racism and discrimination against them in Iran. And I remember all the time I was in school, I don't even have a single Afghan friend, but we had Afghan kids we have kids from Afghanistan in my elementary school, but nobody wanted to be friends with them. And I think that these mild boundaries, even as kids when you are in school, it's just kind of sad. And so what can I say? Even back in Iran, I didn't do, or I didn't act on these kind of issues at all. Or maybe because I had to deal with a lot of other shits because of our shitty governments. But in general, racism was also an issue in Iran, especially towards Afghan immigrants. Yeah, but guess what? After I came to US, I tried to be, not be tunnel visioned in terms of who I should be friend to. I think that pretty much all my adulthood, I never thought in terms of race when I wanted to choose my friends or my colleagues or the people basically I want to hang out with. I just choose them because of who they are. And yeah,
that's good. That's good if you can live in an environment where you could do that and thrive, and there's no initial hurdle because of not predetermined, what's the word I'm looking for, pre-existing sort of biases or discrimination, you know. So that, I mean, I was lucky to grow up in the West Coast, right? California, San Francisco, like Bay Area. So I mean, it was very like liberal out there, and it was just, I grew up and it was just like never a thought. I think my first racist encounter didn't happen until like I was a teenager, I think, when some like a group of passerby kids yelled out "chink," and I was standing next to a Chinese person, and I was like, I'm Korean, so he's talking about you. You know, so, but yeah, you know, so I heard one of those like, go back to China, you chink, or some shit like that. You know what I mean? So I think it was good, because who knows like what my thought process would have been if like there was something in the beginning. And I am grateful for the 13th, because, you know, it got me thinking and researching. Like, I never knew why my mom sort of had like these gut visceral reactions every time like an African American person was around, or if I mentioned that, you know, to her, even though she tried to be as progressive as she could be. You know, she was like, oh, everyone's the same, blah, blah, blah. But she just had this visceral reaction, and so I didn't know, or maybe had forgotten, the whole system designed to pit people against each other, right? And this has nothing to do with the 13th, but it spurred me like looking into it, and I totally forgot about the whole model citizen,
model minority,
right? And Asians were definitely propped up, you know, as like an example, and used unfairly to put, you know, African Americans down.
Yeah.
And then, you know, it led to, you know, the Rodney King LA riots, right? And a lot of, there's a Korean population. I think the biggest K-town is in Los Angeles, and, you know, they own convenience stores, which, you know, were looted. You know, so that created some resentment, but it came from before that. You know, my dad, who's a lovely guy, you know, did a form of that. I remember, like, he was like, so wanted to be so like angry at my brother that he would justify it by like praising me, you know. So why can't you be more like him? And that's just an unfair way to relate to. I mean, this is, individuals are individuals. They should be treated according to you know, merit, and you shouldn't bring, you know, another party into it. So I'm thankful for 13th for that. What else did you learn?
Or what was shocking for you? Because we were talking earlier.
There's so much shocking, but yeah.
Shocking. Okay, wait, I was so engrossed in what you guys were saying. I was like, oh yes, blank mind.
No, that's okay. I tell you what, I'm gonna put up a slide for now, and maybe while you look for while you gather your thoughts, I'll just go ahead.
Oh yeah.
Are you ready?
I remembered another like incident from when I was younger, maybe like 13 or something, in school. And I had this friend, and she had this orange hoodie on, and on the back of the orange hoodie was a Confederate flag. So this, I guess, relates more to our conversation before. But one of my other classmates, who is African American, went up to her and was like, you know, what you're wearing is really offensive, right? And she was like, what do you mean? And he was like, it's a Confederate flag. That's slavery. I'm African American. And she was like, oh, I'm just wearing this hoodie because I like orange. I just like the color.
And does she know that it was a Confederate flag?
I don't really know.
Wait, I'm sorry. How old again?
Like 13.
Okay. Well. Okay.
So she might not have known, but I think I feel like, because her family would be the ones who bought it for her.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they would know.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's the, you know, environment. By human nature, we sort of tend to group each other into tribes, right? Tribalism. That's, you know, that's the word. So
yeah. And just like, I don't know, yeah, just how these ideas come about, and how these like ideas like divide us, with like what you guys were saying before.
Yeah.
I just find really interesting, because I read this like interview with the filmmaker after I watched the documentary, and she was just talking about if we all understand like the architecture of the ideas in our heads, and how they were designed, and how they were put there, and how we gained these notions from the previous generations.
Yeah, definitely 100%. I can't remember. Did they delve into at all like solutions, a pathway forward, what the future might look like? What can we do? Anything like that? I can't recall.
Unfortunately not. I
I
think
think they did a bit.
about
With like technology.
so the last basically I think so the way I divide the documentary in my mind is that okay, in the beginning it sets the historical context. The mid part was mostly about the policy and the state policy in regard and the mechanism behind it that forced basically some of the laws, some of the bills to become into law. So, and the very last 15 minutes of it was about how it's all again relate to current situation, and it talked a little bit about technology and like showing what is happening, but nothing more.
Wait. How would technology help? Like robots?
No, basically what they meant by technology, they
like
meant
forcing
YouTube and
the conversation because
yeah. Basically it was the same thing as YouTube and Twitter and like just
like
broadcast.
media, just media, like broader reach, like tech for broader reach of like knowledge and
basically it was just to start and force the conversation. But I don't believe that they put any like tangible solutions in regards to the policies. They talk about a little bit like prison reform, I remember, but they said that it's kind of impossible to change it all of a sudden, and prison reform is not possible.
If you decriminalize drugs, I think that might be a kick in the I mean, if we believe that the war on drugs was not fair and was used improperly, then I do believe that maybe we should consider. I believe that you should just decriminalize all drugs. I think there's an example in Portugal, but regardless, okay, we're here in the United States, and I just there's so many elements to it. First of all, if someone says you can't do something, your biological inclination is to consider wanting to do that. Second of all, right, if people turn to drugs, that means that they have, possible mental, they're dealing with some sort of like mental struggles, mental health issues, right? So we need to address that as well and provide help for them. Treat
drug addiction as a health issue.
Right, exactly. And also consider the fact that probably one of the deadliest drugs is legal, and that's alcohol.
Exactly.
You could definitely die from alcohol withdrawal, and you can't do that with marijuana. You could smoke as much weed as you want, and you can't overdose on it, but you can definitely you can definitely die from drinking.
Liver problem and
liver.
If your dependency is too much, then
chronic
but that's
alcoholism.
like completely legal, and I don't think it should be illegal. We saw what happened with that, right? Especially like during the pandemic and stuff. Like, okay, fine, I guess people who can handle it, it should be an opportunity for them. And unfortunately, I would say the other thing: if someone wants the opportunity to fuck up their lives with drugs, then they should be able to do it as long as it's not harmful to anyone else. So that, and I think that would be a big boost in terms of rectifying the war on drugs and getting away from these like private prisons with who are self-serving. And I don't know, what else can we do?
Because they in the documentary they showed Clinton apologizing for many of his laws that he signed in the 90s, saying they were like too much, like the 3-strike felony thing and the mandatory minimums. But as they point out in the documentary, like, it's great that he admitted his mistake, but what is he going to do about it now?
Yeah,
like,
what he can do.
And why was he on board with the war on drugs to begin with? It's
because the strategy for the Democrats to finally win over the Republicans.
Yes.
So by getting the Southern vote, because the Republicans were like, yes, we're tough on crime and we're going to criminalize drugs. But the Democrats were like, no, we're not. And nobody was voting for them.
I mean, at least he admits it, but wow. Yeah, see, this whole system's broken. Like, where's the incentive and the motivation for these politicians? His was to get elected, to be a candidate to, be able to get support from super PACs and big donors and things like, so once again, our interests are not aligned. The public interest and politicians and big corporations, we're not on the same, our interests are malaligned.
Yeah, because they will do what they think they have to do in order to get power and profit.
Right, exactly. And because what is the incentive of politicians is to get reelected, as you said, and the incentive for like corporations is to, appease their shareholders, right, and maximize profits.
Yes.
So the incentive isn't, the well-being of the citizens, here. And until we kind of do more to align that root cause, then you can legislate and reform all you want, but these are just not going to be any significant or substantial improvements, in my opinion.
That's right.
Sorry.
Oh no.
Kicked you in the shin.
I'm so angry.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm a violent person. That's my 4th felony.
You know what?
I just attacked Yaz.
No, I attack him.
Because she's from Iran. That's what you're going to tell people.
Yeah. Oh, it reminds me of that.
They had a little portion of immigrants.
Yeah, that reminds me of that part.
Wait, what happened again?
They had a little portion about talking about immigrants and incarcerating immigrants.
Oh,
yes,
okay.
like the detention center, basically.
Oh, yeah.
So they also took the word immigration into criminalization or something like that. The like
cremation.
Basically,
they were burning immigrants.
No, immigration and criminalize.
Right?
So they merged these two, I think, or maybe incarcerate.
They squished the two words together.
Yeah, and they formed like a word. I don't remember what that was, but yeah, that basically the whole system designed to oppress the minorities, and that's sad because if you think about it, it's just like if you are an immigrant and if you are willing to come to a country, it's just to make a better life. But if you are going to end up in detention centers and being incarcerated for like I don't know how much of time, it's just like crazy. And
didn't the Supreme Court just voted on DACA? Speaking of which, I think it passed 5-4 with Roberts being the swing. So at least for now, it looks like a few 100,000 people should feel a little bit better.
That's great
today.
Yeah,
that's great news.
That's a great news in
along with
times.
And then they passed something. I don't know the specifics, but LGBTQ, right? And you cannot.
Yeah, Supreme Court.
Yeah, you can't fire. I don't know all the words. I don't really keep up with this stuff, guys. I watch MasterChef all the time, so I'm doing my best here to educate myself and be a part of society.
You can't fire anyone because of any of your gender or sex or your sexual orientation.
Yeah, you cannot be discriminated basically in your job if you are gay or like or if you are part of LGBTQ community.
Nice. So no one can fire me for only liking lesbians?
No.
Nope, they cannot.
Yes. Also, very sad because that never works out then.
You got to reflect there, buddy.
It's actually an inside joke I have with my aunt because like I had like a run of like 2 or 3 where I had no radar. It was like, oh, that makes sense now. She was lesbian. I was like, why am I always going after lesbians? Or maybe they're just tricking me. That's a good letdown. If they say they're lesbian, it's better than I just don't like you. Right?
That is a better letdown.
Yeah, I'd rather have that. I think I stole that from a movie, What Women Want, starring Mel Gibson. He let a woman down by saying he was gay or something like that, and that was much easier than saying I just don't dig you no more. Okay, well, maybe we can gather our thoughts for a conclusion. I do want to say and point it out just from a filmmaking perspective. You know, how do I do this? Because I don't want to like.
You don't want to like be mad, but you know, it's just from the technical aspect, right?
Yeah. No, so I just wanted to say that I think it's a very important and it's a very powerful film. And it definitely deserves a watch. I got a lot out of it, and I was educated. I struggled a little bit though, just with the frenetic pace, and felt a little fatigued. So I'm wondering if anyone out there can answer this question for me. It's I can understand the if you guys saw the slideshow, some of the images there was very skewed framing. Ava was constantly breaking the 180 rule, which disoriented me. And I can kind of understand, how the subject matter might warrant it. But I think its excessive use throughout the film, drew my attention away from the actual content. And I was personally distracted, but I'm, obviously coming from, behind the lens. So I don't, I would have figured if you want to utilize a tool, you would use it sparingly. So I can't for right now think of a reason why you would want to do that all the way throughout the film. And part of what that led to for me while I was viewing is by the middle of it, my brain and eyes just got fatigued because we were jumping around. She was like cutting people's head, space off with some like Mr. Robot type framing, and I'm just like, well, they're not really talking about being suffocated in that specific scene, so why that scene, why constantly are you jumping the 180 where a person being interviewed appears to look this way, and then in the very next clip appears to look this way.
Yes.
And why would you go from a super wide all the way up to close up and further like disorient, so I can understand in spots, but I can't figure out a reason to do it all the way through. And then the frenetic pace, right, with editing, part of editing is utilizing breathing room for impact. And it just seemed like throughout like the first 60-70%, it was just like this mad pace, one after the other, character or not character, but
speakers.
Yes, speakers just popping up on the screen, and so it took a lot of effort for me to keep pace. I don't know how you guys felt about that, if I'm like totally off base there.
No, I felt really similarly. I was like, wow, this pace is really fast, and there's so much information being presented that I would have liked a bit more breathing room. The spots where they interjected the facts and figures and had like the songs with the text coming up, I was like, okay, yeah, that's nice. It's a little bit of like,
that's cool, stylistic.
Slow down. I like the style of that.
And gave you a little break.
Yeah, a little break, which was needed. But I felt like the pacing was just really like whoosh, so fast.
Right.
Yeah, and I was also kind of like the profile views. I was like, oh, like I was like, I wonder why she's doing that. And I was like, maybe she's trying to like I don't know, like queer filmmaking style, because we need to like change societal structures, so she's like change the filmmaking style. I don't know, that's really
right. And I can understand that like in parts, I guess.
But can really I add something? So to my eyes, that I'm not obviously as trained as you guys, even I'm basically want to say that if she does that on purpose with the framing, with the odd framing,
everything should be on purpose.
So she did it in like a way that it didn't convey any additional like message to a person like me. I didn't like get the whole like concept of, oh, she wants to talk about this like the marginalizing basically African American, or she wants to like show that they have been under like the brutality. I didn't get any of those concepts by the odd framing, and I exactly agree with you. There was one scene that a same character was appearing on scene, um, and you will have like a front view of that character, and the next cut was him from like somewhere from behind, and it was just like odd because I can get the profile, but having like someone from the back, the same character with a very short
Yeah.
pause in between the two scenes, it's just like it was a little odd.
Yeah, I mean, like the thing is like, I think the lighting was fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
Good cinematography.
The graphic was great
Like
also.
individually, but like stitched together and then running throughout was the part that sort of like, you know, messed me up. And I get what you're saying because you know, everything should have a purpose, right? Your wide angle lens conveys a different meaning than your 50 millimeter, than your 200 millimeter lens, right? Your low angle conveys something different than you know, a high angle, right? Your framing, right, whether you're using rule of thirds or golden rule or whatever, is traditional. So if you go non-traditional and give them no breathing room, that means something, you know, as well. And then to see it kind of jump around, maybe I'm just not smart enough to understand where she's coming from. You know, I do understand like certain elements and topics, you know, maybe kind of like match up with the shots that she selected. But then oftentimes I just got distracted from
Yeah.
but Ava D is a beast, so you
Yes,
know,
and I just
that's why I'm like, I must have missed something, you know, because I know she's top. She's friends with Oprah, so I'm gonna say bad shit about. Shoot.
Yeah, I'm only angry about that Trump scene, but that's okay because I don't like Trump. So I also want to like acknowledge a particular scene. It's not a particular. So the one that it shapes a debate between a person who was like between two different people. They were talking about the ALEC, this ALEC organization that was pushing
the guy they had from ALEC.
Yeah, there was a guy from ALEC, and he was, I think he was like a senator of like Maryland, something. He was a senator and he was a member of that ALEC legislative board, and we had his shot, like. Combined with the shot of another lady or two other ladies that they were trying to provide facts or reasoning why what all ALEC is trying to do is basically put more people in jails, and if they change any direction, it's because they are basically doing for good publicity if they are saying anything otherwise. And that scene, I mean, the whole conversation back and forth between them, although it wasn't a conversation, but we had cuts from that lady to the other gentleman. It was just like very engaging because the shots from her were in a way that you trust him, but the shots from the man who was from ALEC, it was all like close-ups, so you can look into his eyes, and it was kind of like you could see that I think Ava want to kind of like sarcastically focuses on him and showing him as like a basically a liar or a person who is not telling the truth. So that was like a nice little details for me, that we had the straight like close-up looks of that guy's eyes when he was talking about, no, it's not true, I have nothing to say about, but the other people, we always have like an angle view of them when they are providing facts. And so that was a tiny little detail that I like that very much.
Right on. Cool. You're gonna have to show me that later. That scene.
Yeah. So maybe I should like ask your opinion.
I also really enjoyed that part. Because at first I didn't realize the guy was from ALEC, and I was like, wait a minute, what he's saying doesn't sound like it matches the rest of everything, and I realized, oh, he's from the opposing. Okay.
Yeah, he has kind of like this.
Isn't that amazing though, that these corporations can influence lawmakers? Like they can essentially just write their own laws.
These lobbyists.
Yes.
And one dude got caught right with the logo.
Uh-huh.
Oh my god, it was hilarious.
Dumbass.
something with a
It's
law.
like, this is my
here.
law, and it didn't come from anyone but me. Well, I received this paper from you, and it has their logo on it exactly.
And it's word for word.
Same font, word for word, same logo.
Yeah, it was
You
nice.
Fucking dumbass.
But I was telling Sarah actually before we came to the studio, we were on the car and I was like, I was shocked at the beginning to know about this ALEC organization, but then I was like, okay, this isn't it how like politics works in general, because we have lobbyist groups, we have like, so basically we know now about them, and ALEC is like this evil organization in this film, but there are tons of them, and basically every bills that is pushed through Senate or like House of Representative, basically it's pushed through similar channels. So
Yeah, and that's why until our interests are more aligned, like they're not gonna, they're going to be influenced by the people with money, influence, and power.
Yeah.
And these are these corporations. So, yep, this is where we're at right now. And this is why the solution is very clear. It's Andrew Yang. UBI.
It is
I just want 1,000. I'm just kidding. No, we really got to think about solutions to the root of all this.
Yes. Root cause treatment is better, and prevention is always better than try to like make the situation.
That's a good thing. It just, like where like health insurance companies' interests lie. Like if you have an ailment, like let's say high blood pressure or diabetes, right? Do you think the health insurance companies' interests are selling and providing costly medications, or do you think their interest would be getting information out to the public about how to prevent getting diabetes in the first place? Which of the two? Like just anecdotally, and I don't blame my doctor at all, but I can understand how doctors are like put in a position where they, first of all, there's the Hippocratic Oath, and maybe you need medication to immediately help yourself out. But also, aren't they tied with pharmaceutical companies in terms of, if you provide X amount, well, like you get some sort of bonus or something along those lines, right? Anyways, I could get those details wrong. Like I said, I watch like Master Chef and, fucking Love is Blind. But I will say this from my own personal experiences. When I tested high for high blood pressure, the first thing was just like, you need to be on these drugs and you need to be on these drugs every day. You can't skip a day. And this is in perpetuity. Not once was there a discussion of, okay, well, let's take a look at your weight and let's take a look at your diet and let's see what's going on, and then let's try this avenue out first. I'm sure there are plenty of doctors that did that, and I trust my doctor, so I'm sure he had a reason for it, but I was still surprised that that was an avenue, because when I, for myself, looked into my diet, my weight, and then fixed that, all of a sudden, no more high blood pressure and no more medications needed. And which is cheaper? I did it through fasting. What's cheaper, fasting, $0, or these medications that I got to take every day for the rest of my life? So where's the interest, right? And, so I think Rogan said this too. It's like, we want to mandate stuff on COVID and coronavirus, but why is no one talking about prevention, like strengthening your immune system? Things of that nature. There's like a lack of education on that part. So, once again, it comes down to like people's incentives and motivations and rambling. Sorry.
No, actually, you brought so many accurate and good points. I can't do anything rather than to agree with you. And yes,
Jesse and I agree.
Finally,
high five, but it's COVID 5.
I'm amazed.
Okay.
All right, let's wrap it up. Conclusions. Do you want to final thoughts?
So final thoughts. Movie, the documentary was amazing. There's so much information, and it's a great educational resource. And it's also free on YouTube if anyone doesn't have Netflix.
Oh, that's nice.
Yes, that is great. And yeah, it's a great way to educate yourself. and to, you know, be current on events. And yeah, I don't know. I knew that like the U.S. had a really high incarceration rates, but I didn't realize how high or how bad it was. Like I think the first fact and figure they gave in the movie was that the U.S. is 5% of the world's population, but we hold 25% of the world's prisoners.
Ooh,
It's insane.
those numbers don't match.
Yeah.
Yeah, that does not compute.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also other countries don't privatize their like basically prisons.
system.
So
Yeah.
that I think that adds up.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just a really thought-provoking, great documentary with lots of history, and I enjoyed watching it.
Nice.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
Yes.
I
Final thoughts.
So I just, as a final note, I wanna also acknowledge the way this documentary ends, and it was just basically by bringing this kind of question or concept to the table that, oh, if you are a person that think that you are very different from like people who did slavery in the past or who were a slave owner, and you always think that, oh, if I lived on those times, I would have done very differently, or I would have never approved of lynching or doing all those sort of bad things, and you think that, oh, now you're living in a different time. Basically you are living in the same time. Basically the situations hasn't changed that much. It's just like the look of it has changed. Now we have these credit systems that basically don't let many community of colors get like mortgage for their house, for their homes. And basically, since we are all coming from the background of doing other projects with Habitat for Humanity, we now know, like in our city, like many communities of colors, they don't have access to affordable housing. And we talked, I think, about this housing issues a lot of other times in our previous podcast. But I think if you think about that, basically the things changed, but not changed that much. So
But the norms and ideas are still there.
So never think that, oh, things are good, just try to do something. And also I agree that we need to, if any movements are about to start, it's better for African American to take the lead themselves. But when we don't have enough like black senators, or we don't have enough black like legislative or people with legislative power, legislators, yeah. So maybe it's the time to vote and to maybe like change our viewpoint in terms of how we want to participate, or how we can have a role to empower African American people, or people of other minorities, so they can change the situation, or they can take the lead themselves and be the change they wanted, rather than just being the white savior, or being like the fake hero of all of this. So
Totally agree.
Yeah,
I'm on board with you. Good words. I wish I had something to offer. I wish I could. I wish I had something to say about the 13th, but I only watched like an hour ago, so I don't remember much. I will say though that it was nice talking to you two. I got it now. I do like the 13th. I do recommend it. I'm on board with you two. If you find it a little frenetic, just play it at like 3/4 speed.
yes.
There we go.
There you go.
There you go.
All right. Well, hopefully you got something out of it. I got something out of talking to you two today. So thanks. We'll awkwardly say goodbye now.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.